Hello, this is Ralph K. Ginorio. Give me a few minutes and I'll suggest an idea worth considering. On the meaning of an Obama victory. As I speak, it is Friday, September 28th, 2012. We're about 60 days out from the general election. But I try to imagine a book written by a mentor of mine from Chile named Perico, Herbert Muller. He wrote a book called Allende Wins before the 1964 presidential election in Chile. This is an election that was won not by Allende but by the conservative Eduardo Frei. But in Allende Wins, the writer Perico was trying to awaken Chileans to the threat that the socialist Allende posed to Chile's traditional sense of freedom. So I've been trying, to my dream's detriment, to imagine what it would be like on November 7th after a Barack Obama victory. What it would mean. What it would mean about us, the American citizenry, and what it would mean for our future. And as a historian, whenever I look ahead, I look back. Alexander Tyler was a writer who studied the fall of democracy in Athens before our 13 colonies broke away from the British Empire. His analysis was this, forgive me for reading. A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves money from the public treasure. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidate promising the most money from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's great civilizations, in his case, governments by the people, has been 200 years, Tyler writes. These nations have progressed through the following sequence. From bondage to spiritual faith. From spiritual faith to great courage. From courage to liberty. From liberty to abundance. From abundance to selfishness. From selfishness to complacency. From complacency to apathy. From apathy to dependency, and from dependency back into bondage. Tyler understood that the burden of freedom is eternal vigilance, not only against the external threat, but against the internal seduction, the temptation to view the government as the milk cow from which you will suck your life's nutrients. If Obama wins, it will mean that the last defense against Obamacare, not the legislature, not the judiciary, thank you, John Roberts, but the American citizen will have failed to protect his and her own freedom against a paternalistic, socialistic government that turns everyone into a ward of the state, dependent upon the taxpayer for their medical care, and he who pays the piper calls the tune. Do not be surprised when your health care is rationed and when the prime decision maker in your health care over your own body is no longer you, a doctor you have chosen, or an insurance company, or an employer's insurance company that you have chosen, but rather Uncle Sam and a death panel that decides you're too old or non-essential to be worth that kind of surgery. An econometric model will determine your fate, not your own free choice. If Obama wins, it will mean that the American people, the 47% that Romney referenced, who do not pay federal taxes and therefore take rather than give, will have won. The parasites will have taken over the host. I'm going to be very blunt, because I've been so subtle and diplomatic so far. It'll be a sign that we are over the tipping point, that the American people want to be taken care of rather than to take care of themselves. I remember the story of Elian Gonzalez, the Cuban boy whose mother died to bring him out of communist tyranny into the United States. and how the Cuban government and the Clinton administration wrung their hands. I remember talking to many Americans, many who were liberals or moderates, who said, well, what about the father's right? What about the father's right to raise his child? Shouldn't Gonzalez be returned to his father in Cuba? What these people fail to understand is that in communist Cuba, under the Castros, no one becomes an adult. The father doesn't raise the son. The Communist Party raises the son. The state raises the son to a point of perpetual adolescence, a permanent teenage status, whereby you never become an adult capable of making dangerous choices that might be against your better interests. We will have infantilized ourselves so much as a people that we will accept a government that intercedes between our choice and our actions for our own good. Will be the 40-year-old living in his parents' basement, sitting in his underwear, tapping at the computer keyboard because he's run away from life. Freedom takes courage. Adult life takes responsibility and courage. The courage to control yourself, to take risks, to face the unknown. Because only by being willing to take risks, only by having courage, only by being willing to risk failure do we earn success and do we experience genuine freedom. Are the American people perpetual teenagers, parasites, begging helpless victims for Uncle Sam to be their paterfamilias? Or are the American people still free? Men and women worth calling the name men and women in charge of their own fate. Worthy of freedom. Worthy of leading the free world. Only you and I can decide that on November 6th, Election Day. Be well.